California Congresswoman Karen Bass has introduced new legislation focused on victims of human trafficking, dubbed the Put Trafficking Victims First Act of 2019. The bill calls for funding for victim support and the expansion of victim services. It also directs the Attorney General to report on efforts to increase restitution to victims of trafficking.
The State Department estimates that up to nearly 18,000 people are trafficked every year. In an op-ed published in The Hill, actresses Laura and Vanessa Marano applaud the Congresswoman's bill, saying, quote, "It puts victims of this horrific crime first and it takes their needs as well as their opinions into account." They join us now via Skype to discuss how they got involved in the cause. Laura and Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Thanks again for having us.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Absolutely. Why did you guys feel compelled in order to speak out on behalf of this legislation at this time and this place? Just give us an insight into the viewers and why you're very passionate about this cause and what's really good about this bill in particular.
Well, Laura and I recently starred together and produced a film called Saving Zoe that greatly deals with online sexual exploitation. And we started working with a charity called Equality Now on promotion for that film and to better educate ourselves about this issue. And we actually had the honor of meeting survivors of sex trafficking and online sexual exploitation. And through working with them and speaking with them and getting their thoughts, opinions, and just overall sense of what they've gone through, we saw firsthand how important it is to seek out survivor-informed solutions about this issue, because you're not going to solve it unless you're listening to people who know firsthand what it's like to experience it.
Yeah, it seems obvious, but it actually isn't in practice to put survivors first, put their opinions, put their thoughts, put their experiences first, and take that into account of how to frame the issue of sex and human trafficking. And so when we found out about this bill and about Congresswoman Bass's efforts into this bill to pass it and what the bill stands for, we knew immediately we wanted to get behind it and rally anyone who supports us or knows us to know more about this bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What surprised you most as you sort of have become more educated about this crime and about the women and some men who are impacted by this crime? Because in a lot of ways in America, I feel like sex trafficking can be invisible. It tends to be something that people think are happening sort of overseas, and it's not in their communities, it's not in their cities. That's not the case at all. In every American city in the country, you can find survivors of sex trafficking. This is often happening right under our very noses. Laura, what have you sort of learned that shocked and surprised you?
I think exactly that. One, trafficking for children has been reported in every single state in this country. Which that's something I definitely didn't realize at first at all. I think I was one of those people that just thought of sex trafficking as something that doesn't really happen in America. It happens overseas, it happens somewhere else, and that's completely false. Trafficking worldwide is a $99 billion industry.
For sex trafficking specifically.
And huge in the United States.
And I believe it's 94% of it is women and girls. So that's the thing is, as us being young women, we know that our gender, our age group is being predominantly affected by this issue. And just like you said, we think it's happening overseas, but the United States is one of the top transit source destinations for human trafficking, not even just for sex trafficking, but for human trafficking in general.
So I know that you both have emphasized that this bill puts survivors first and lets us hear from them. What do you guys mean by that? I want viewers to understand, what is the mechanisms within the legislation that will allow these people's voices to be heard by law enforcement?
Well, for one thing, the bill is seeking to re-educate the way that we look at human trafficking and actually taking the survivors' opinions into account in that education. They're taking surveys of survivors of how our current systems that are in place of how we deal with survivors and how we treat them afterwards, what their experience has been on that. As well as also not prosecuting survivors right away for a crime. I think that's something that we don't realize that still does happen, is that we're not taking every step forward to ensure that a person has been victimized. And just because something is considered prostitution, we don't know that that was that person's choice at all. And a lot of the times it's not. A lot of the time, child specifically has been forced into that situation.
Yeah, if you look at the bill, there's a bunch of different aspects that are exactly doing that, putting survivors first. I mean, the first aspect of the bill is literally directing the Attorney General to take into account survivors' experiences and their thoughts and opinions.
Right. Ladies, it's your work on Saving Zoe that inspired you to become more educated, to speak out. So tell us a little bit about the film. What can viewers expect?
Well, it's the process of actually even putting the film on screen. It's based on a book that we read 12 years ago.
Absolutely love.
It's by author Alison Noel, who is just goddess of a woman. And you know, it's funny, we have kind of two stories of it, because we have the story of the film, which it's quite dark. It's a love story between two sisters. It takes place a year after the older sister has been murdered, and the younger sister finds her diary and realizes her sister is not the person she thought she was, and that there is more to the story of her murder than meets the eye.
And what we were so attracted to about the story is my character Zoe, once we realized that she's been greatly affected by online sexual exploitation. The shame and the guilt and the fear and the embarrassment caused her to go that path alone. And when we had the pleasure of showing the film to survivors of sex trafficking, they said that is exactly what it feels like. You feel a tremendous amount of embarrassment and responsibility and guilt that no one should feel, especially when you're a victim of a heinous crime. And we realized, and specifically that is what drew us to want to really speak out about this bill, is we need survivors to feel like their opinion matters. We need survivors to feel like they're going to be believed, and that there is no shame in asking for help, that there should be no shame in reporting this crime, that there aren't going to be repercussions for you as a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
It's
what
been-
are the
it-
Sorry, so
Oh,
what
I
are
was
the
just-
next steps? Yeah. What are the next steps for people to learn about this legislation and about the important work that you guys are doing?
Well, we wrote an amazing op-ed for The Hill that we would love everyone to read. In that, we actually linked to Congresswoman Bass's speech at the House of Representatives, where she breaks down the bill. The next step, obviously, is for the bill to pass through the Senate. It passed through the House at 414-1, which is amazing, especially in the world we're living in, where politics seem to be incredibly partisan, that this is a tremendous amount of bipartisan support. So we're really hoping that the senators will pass this bill. And of course, the next steps for anyone would be to call their senator and say that the bill is important to them. You can read more about it online.
And
Yeah, and also,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Laura. What were you going to say?
so I was going to say, gotta love internet and internet connection. I was just going to say also, you know, as we kind of mentioned before, we've been working with an amazing organization called Equality Now, and they have really informed us about this issue. And if anyone wants to learn more or has questions, you can go on their website and learn more as well.
Yeah, equalitynow.org. Because I think the thing that we found with making Saving Zoe was it was tremendously difficult to get a green light on a film that talked about this issue. The entertainment industry specifically was like, this is a little too dark for young women to talk about. And we want to make sure, like, well, just because something's dark, we should be talking about it. In fact, that's the very reason why.
And what a compliment that survivors saw themselves in your representation and in the film that you put together. That's got to be just like the hugest compliment you possibly can imagine for your work. But I also wanted to ask, what was it like working together? What was that experience like?
On a lighter note.
Yeah, it was, honestly, I mean, I'm such a little sister. I'm just like, I love me, big sister. So I was having the best time ever because I got to work with my big sister, and we both got to work with our mom. You know, it definitely was a very hectic shoot. It's an indie film.
We shot it in 15 days.
Wow.
And so there was sleep happening. It was challenging for sure, but it was so incredibly special.
That's something that we're so proud of, especially as being our first time producing this film with our mom, is that it is a story that is about young women, and it's a story about an issue that affects young women. And I couldn't imagine a better project to be doing with my family.
Yeah. Well, you gave voice to a group that is too often voiceless, which is so important and sort of the highest possible purpose of art. So, ladies, thank you so much for your work, and thanks for being with us today. We're grateful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
And we'll have more Rising after this.